Hello everybody, Liam Carroll, SYS Wealth and Financial Planners here with the latest in our series of podcasts called Health for Your Wealth. And the idea behind these podcasts is that we interview professionals in their industry and thus giving value to people and giving health to your wealth. Delighted today to be joined by Paul Molloy. And just to give you a brief background on Paul, he started life as an accountant training with Deloitte, Mazars, and in a small practice was qualified in 2006 with an ACA. He began studying for the tax exams in 2020 with the Irish Taxation Institute, toughest exams he ever did. He might tell us about that in a few minutes. And after a period of 6 years working in business development with a tax consultancy, software company, and financial services, he started his own tax business in 2018 and went full-time at it in 2020. And he has two children, Jake and Evie. He loves history and politics and is also, I don't know, should I say this out loud, Paul, but he's a long-suffering Everton fan.
Long-suffering.
And he has done a lot of speeches with Toastmasters and volunteered for several charities. So, Paul, thanks very much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks very much, Liam. Thanks for having me here.
No problem at all. I suppose, Paul, the first question we start with everybody, really, on a personal level, how has this pandemic over the last number of months affected you?
Yeah, well, I mean, very clearly the first thing would be the fact my two kids, Jake and Evie, they live in Limerick and I live in Dublin. So because of the travel restrictions, I haven't been able to see them that often. We talk on Skype every week for a good hour or so, but it's not quite the same thing. I'd say from a personal thing, I'd be like anyone else. Like you, Liam, I'm in need of a rogue barber who will come to me and charge me an obscene amount of money, ask no questions, just get it done. That'd be great, and just like going to the gym, and I suppose the cinema as well. I mean, I suppose from a professional point of view, I started the business full time back in February of last year. I must have known COVID was coming, and there's about 5 or 6 really big taxes in the Irish tax system, and then 10, 12 kind of smaller but more important ones, one of which would be pensions. So there is a huge amount to know, and you really kind of have to know that information. You can't continually say to people, I'll come back to you, or I'll check that. You've got to know a lot of this stuff. So that was the biggest time investment that I had to make, and that was the biggest challenge. And then I suppose like everyone else, I got used to trading on Zoom, and through networking. The revenues are really right where I want them right now. I'm nearly too busy, which is a great complaint. It's all going pretty well.
Fantastic. And there's a huge lesson to people there, Paul, for people to adapt as well. Like that your business, you started off, you didn't know this COVID was coming, but you've adapted to the means of Zoom and Microsoft Teams, etc. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I assumed, probably Liam, a bit like yourself, that you had to meet someone for the first time before you could do business with them.
Mea culpa, yeah, exactly.
But after a while, you realize, no, that's not necessarily the case, and everyone's gotten so used to Zoom that I'd really want to be meeting someone fairly obscenely wealthy, to take out the time to travel with the commute, So I think Zoom is enabling all of us to be a lot more efficient with our time, and that's a terrific thing.
Hopefully, Paul, 1 or 2 obscenely wealthy people might be listening to this, and you might have to
so.
get out in the car to meet them.
That'd be great. Absolutely.
I went through your professional background there a couple of minutes ago, and just any tips for people using your background that they could do, like that you think is the most important thing to do. And I'm going to come to a different element in a minute, but tips for people using your background, Paul, which is wide and varied, to be fair.
Yeah, I suppose, I started life as an accountant, and I think it was back in, 2010, 2011, it's about 10 years ago now. I went into my first sales job. There was about 45 minutes training, and then I was just handed a phone and a CRM and told to start making phone calls. So that was about as terrifying an experience as anyone can have. But I would say to anybody, no matter what operational role you're in, no matter how far away from maybe the clients you are, and this would be particularly relevant, I think, for people in their late teens or 20s coming out of college, get yourself a sales job of some description early in your career, because it is very, very difficult. But once you've done it, once you've actually gotten the hang of contacting someone you don't know terribly well, which is a nerve-wracking experience, and being told, well, some people can be quite rough, but fantastic experience to have, because as you hit a point in your career, 30s, 40s, if you can't sell, you will be limited in what you can do. You will be limited in what you can do. So it's great to have been able to marry the operational and business development hats over the years.
That's a fantastic piece, Paul. I haven't heard that one now before, and that's hugely interesting. I think hugely beneficial for people to look at and see where they go from it. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, thanks for that. That's very interesting. I suppose a nugget of advice from your experience. I suppose the question I'm asking here really is something that is totally underused in your industry that people don't do a lot, and that they don't know about nearly, and that they could do for their own personal benefit or company's benefit.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people working in and I hope I'm understanding you correctly, Liam.
Yeah.
Working in tax or going out, on their own in tax, they probably worked in a big tax firm at some point. Again, it kind of comes back to the whole business development, because their technical knowledge might be very good, and we can all get very excited about tax and all the things it can do, but what the fundamental thing is, what does the client want to do? And that might involve tax and it might not. So the advice, you've always got to have your commercial hat on and say, well, this might make terrific sense, but it's going to cause so many problems down the line that, I'm going to bring it up with the client. I'll raise it with him. I'll tell him why I think it's a bad idea, so that at the very least he has the information. But it's what a client wants, not just the tax side of things.
Is there a difference, Paul, between what a client wants and what a client needs as well at times, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And really all you can do is just, in my job, is just to expose them to the opportunities. One thing that comes up quite a lot is people love the idea of buying property, and then when they hear how beneficial it could be to buy a property through a pension, they get even more excited. And the issue is, you could be talking to someone in their 50s or late 50s, and that mightn't be such a good idea for them to do, because it could be very difficult to liquidate the property prior to retirement. Now we're getting a little bit technical here, but it's a good example of what a client might want to do versus what they need to do is probably focus on more of a fund than the traditional funds. Then a property investment could cause huge problems.
From your point of view, Paul, with the property investment as part of your pension portfolio, what would be, I suppose everyone is different now and all that, but ideally, what term should be left towards retirement before you would look at taking on one of those, in your opinion? Taking into account.
I think someone in their 40s is the right type of person to purchase a property with their pension. And the reason I say this is that there'll be few people, even with a big sum in a pension, could afford to buy a property outright. So you're most likely looking at some kind of loan of, I think it has to be 50%. There are some providers out there, not the traditional banks, but some other providers that will provide loans for pension funds that want to buy property. So I think you need to give yourself about 10, 12 years at least to repay that loan. I think 15 is the most they'll allow you anyway. So it's a very interesting option for someone in their 40s. Someone in their mid 50s, I think the ship has sailed. I think it's too late.
Yeah, I agree with that. You have to take into account charges and liquidity, etc., like that. Yeah. Obviously, I'm involved in the financial services industry, as you are well aware. What financial services product have you used, or have you advised with your clients, maybe outside of the pension property one that we spoke of, even, that you feel has represented the best value for money and that you would highly recommend people to avail of?
Yeah, what I would only just say with any company pension scheme is that the opportunity to fund a huge amount of money is really something that the ordinary person can't do. So if there's anybody listening who is making substantial profits, 50 to 100 grand or more, plus a salary from their business, then they should really be looking to do that, because it could be a fantastic option. In terms of life cover, I suppose I feel, and God and Liam, I hope I'm not going to cost you a sale or two here, but I feel that, you know, a parent has an obligation to have a certain amount of life cover that they can afford, of course, up to the age that maybe their youngest child is about 21.
I'd agree with that.
And after that, the kids have flown the nest. They're living somewhere else. They're renting somewhere else. Could be still at home, but they're far more independent than they were when they were 6 and 7. And, you know, there are some, you know, there's some firms out there that will have people in life insurance policies up to their 70s or 80s, paying massive premiums for little benefits. You know, I think people really need to think about how much life cover do they need. You know, it's inevitable that if you've got a couple taking out a life insurance policy, that one of the parties, the husband or the wife, could have, you know, a serious health issue at some time in their 30s or 40s. And you know, extending a life insurance policy past a certain point, if there's been health issues, it just gets very, very, very expensive. And, you know, if your kids are 15 or 16, you don't need 500 grand's worth of life cover. You know, 100, 125 will do it. And, you know, so I think people need to educate themselves a little bit about this whole area. I know it can be a bit dull and a bit boring and all that, but it is bloody important, because if you or your husband or your wife die, the only person bringing a check to the funeral is Liam Carroll or someone like that. You know, and everyone else will just have sympathy, but the guy with the check is pretty important. So the right check that day.
Obviously, it doesn't replace what has happened, but from a financial point of view, it's a huge help, and that's the reality of the situation. Yeah, that is. I suppose the best bit of advice that you ever got, be it, I suppose, personal advice, or the best saying you've ever heard, maybe, or a motto that you might live by, something onto those lines that you would have for people, Paul.
Yeah, I remember really when I was starting out about 3 years ago, I remember meeting an accountant in a network group. It was my first time being in a network group, and his advice to me was, you know, if you do any work for people in a network group where you know, your reputation is gonna pick up steam pretty quick, you've got to kill yourself for those people. You've got to put in an exercise or a job that you would never normally do for the average person, and that way, you know, it helps build up your reputation as someone that people should deal with.
Yeah.
Because not only is the quality of the work to a very, very high standard, but you know, you're really demonstrating that you kind of care about the person, that you want the best for them. You know, your advice isn't just like I said earlier, isn't just basic tax advice. You know, you must wrap the commercial into the tax as well, and give them all you have, and particularly when you're starting out, you know, is not to overcharge. The money will come in time, you know, but it's to, you know, particularly into a network group like that, you know, it's not just the people in the room at a network group, but it's all the people that those people know, which can be, you know, 10, 1,000, 5,000 people, depending. You know, it can literally be that big an impact. That job you do, you know, if the person is happy, they're going to say they're happy at the network meeting, and you just don't know what's going to spin.
It's very powerful. Yeah.
One recommendation that day, you know, the word of another person in the network group saying, this guy did work for me, this lady did work for me, it was fantastic, I was thrilled, I was delighted. You know, you will never have.
You're beginning to really sound like a John Loftus convert at the moment, Paul. I must say.
Well, I mean, this would have been 3 years ago. You know.
Oh yeah, I know. Money. Yeah.
And oh, I mean, I think John certainly is a big believer in that, and I think John is quite fussy about who he lets into his network at Midwest Mentoring. I don't think he lets everybody in by any means.
No.
But I did some work recently for somebody in the group, and it was terrific. That person was very fulsome in their in that they were happy with the work, which is terrific. And they wouldn't be saying that, Liam, if they weren't.
No,
So
they weren't, if they nothing.
the worst thing is they could say nothing. So it goes back to the initial point. You've got to make sure they're going to be singing from the rafters about you.
Yeah.
And business development is a difficult thing, and if word of mouth, because of the quality of your work you've done, is so good, then you won't have to worry too much about digital marketing or anything like that, hopefully.
That is the thing. Paul, thank you very much. I learned a huge amount there, I must say, and I think people could do an awful lot worse, Paul, than contacting you in relation to any tax queries, and we went through your background at the onset of the video. You're available. All your contact details, apologies, I go backwards slightly. All your contact details will be there at the end. And I'd like to thank Andrew and Jeff from Wendigo Media for helping to put this together. And Paul, you are available via Zoom, obviously now, and Microsoft Teams, whichever one takes your fancy. And you're well worth having a chat with. And I'd just like to take this opportunity. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule at the moment and to join us. So thanks very much, Paul.
Thanks, Ian.